I'm going to share a story that feels surreal, like something straight out of a bad movie. It all started about a year ago when everything seemed fine in my life. I was married to a woman named Jessica, and we had been together for nearly 7 years. We had our ups and downs, sure, but things felt stable enough. We had our routines, dinner at 6, TV shows after, and the weekend excursions to the nearby park. It was predictable but comforting. But then I began noticing small changes in Jessica's behavior. She started working late more often, claiming it was because she was taking on extra projects at work. I remember thinking, good for her, she's ambitious. I would often tell her how proud I was of her, which in hindsight feels like such a naive thing to say. She also became more secretive with her phone. I would catch her hastily putting it face down when I entered the room, a little defensive when I asked about it, saying things like, "It's just work stuff." I brushed it off, convincing myself it was nothing, but deep down something felt off. I could feel the distance growing between us, like a slow drift apart that I couldn't quite put my finger on. Friends began to notice too. They mentioned that Jessica seemed different, more distant. I remember laughing it off, saying it was just a phase. Little did I know, the real trouble was brewing right under my nose. The day I discovered the affair was a typical Wednesday afternoon. I had taken the day off to catch up on some chores and maybe watch a movie. I was cleaning up the house when I stumbled upon her phone lying on the kitchen counter. It was uncharacteristically unlocked, and curiosity got the better of me. I hesitated for a moment, but I felt a knot in my stomach urging me to look. Scrolling through her messages, I found texts that made my heart race. There were flirty exchanges, emojis that felt like daggers, and then there it was, her admitting she was meeting someone. My breath caught in my throat as I read the name, Ryan. My ex's new boyfriend. The very guy I thought was a loser when I had dumped my ex. I felt an icy grip around my heart, and a wave of nausea washed over me. I read everything, my hands trembling. As I pieced together the timeline, I realized the affair had been going on for months. The signs I had ignored, the late nights, the secretive behavior, all of it came crashing down on me like a ton of bricks. It was surreal. It felt like the floor had just dropped away beneath me. When Jessica came home that evening, I was sitting at the kitchen table, her phone in front of me like a ticking time bomb. She walked in, her face lighting up with a smile that quickly faded as she saw my expression. It didn't take long for me to confront her. I laid it all out, every last detail I had found, and her reaction was something I never expected. At first she laughed, thinking I was joking, but as I continued to press her, the laughter faded to bewilderment. "You're being ridiculous," she snapped. She tried to deflect, claiming they were just friends, that I was overreacting. But I could see the cracks in her facade. Her voice wavered, and the bite in her words started to turn to desperation as she scrambled for excuses. As she denied everything, I felt betrayal wash over me like a cold wave. Anger surged inside me, mixing with sorrow and disbelief. I had trusted her, and she had shattered that trust into a million pieces. I wanted to scream, to throw things, to make her feel half of what I was feeling, but I held back. I stood there, frozen, as she continued to fabricate stories, trying to twist the truth to fit her narrative. This was the turning point in my emotional journey, where shock morphed into anger. I felt like a fool, and the realization settled in. I had been living a lie. How could I have been so blind? The betrayal cut deeper than I could have imagined, and I was left grappling with confusion and heartbreak. Little did I know, this was only the beginning of what would become a much darker chapter in my life. Would I seek revenge? Would I try to fix things? The thoughts raced through my mind as I battled the whirlwind of emotions. But first, I needed to calm down and think clearly. As I sat there, still processing the shock of Jessica's betrayal, I felt a mix of emotions swirling through me: anger, sadness, and a strange sense of disbelief. I was in a state of shock, and the reality of the situation hit me like a freight train. I had never expected this to happen. I had always considered Jessica to be the one person I could rely on, the one who would stand by me no matter what. But here I was, ripped open by her infidelity. That night, Jessica didn't sleep in our bed. She avoided me like I was the plague, moving to the guest room, leaving me alone with my racing thoughts. I could hear her sobbing quietly from the other room, and part of me felt a pang of sympathy. But then the anger would rise again, drowning out any compassion I could muster. The days that followed were a blur. We barely spoke, except for the occasional stilted conversation about our daily routine. I kept replaying the confrontation in my head, wondering if I should have reacted differently. Maybe I should have broken down and begged her to tell me the truth. But deep down, I felt this intense rush of determination brewing within me. I wasn't just going to let this go. I decided that my next step was to gather evidence and understand the full scope of the affair. I was no longer willing to be the victim in this situation. I started doing some digging, asking friends if they had seen Jessica with Ryan or if they knew anything. I didn't want to just accept her lies. I needed proof of what she was doing behind my back. A week later, I received an unexpected text from a mutual friend, Amanda. She wanted to meet for coffee and had something important to share. My heart raced at the idea of having someone corroborate my fears. I agreed to meet her at our usual cafe, and I arrived early, nervously tapping my foot against the floor, replaying the last few weeks in my mind. When Amanda arrived, she looked worried. She glanced around before sitting down. "I don't want to make things worse, but I think you need to know a few things," she started, and just like that, my anxiety cranked up another notch. She told me she had seen Jessica and Ryan together multiple times, dinners, casual outings, and once even at a bar a few blocks from our home. It felt like a punch to the gut hearing it confirmed. I wanted to scream, to lash out at both of them, but instead I just nodded, trying to process the information. Amanda also mentioned that she had heard whispers among our circle of friends, many of whom were starting to side-eye Jessica. It seemed I wasn't the only one who noticed that something was off. I thanked Amanda for her honesty, and as I drove home, I felt a surge of clarity. I didn't want to wallow in self-pity. I could either let this destroy me or turn it into something that would help me regain control. That was when the idea of revenge started to take root in my mind. I would show Jessica and Ryan that their escapade wouldn't come without consequences. The next few weeks were a strange mix of cold resolve and simmering anger. I began laying the groundwork for my plan. It wasn't about being malicious. It was about poetic justice. I wanted them to realize just how foolish they were for betraying me, how their actions were not without repercussions. I started going out more often, reconnecting with old friends, and even hitting the gym. I wanted to focus on myself, on building the best version of me. I knew Jessica would notice the changes. I wanted her to see that I was thriving while she was tangled up in her miserable affair. At the same time, I began to gather more dirt on Jessica and Ryan. I reached out to a couple of friends who worked in the same industry as Ryan, hoping to find something I could use against him. It felt like uncovering a hidden world I had never been a part of, and with each new piece of information, I felt more empowered. But the plan itself began to form in my mind. I wanted to expose their affair in a way that would make them both squirm. I wanted Ryan to know the consequences of sleeping with another man's wife, and I wanted Jessica to see the fallout of her choices. I was no longer the passive husband she could take for granted. No, I was going to show her just how strong I could be. As I plotted my revenge, the emotional roller coaster was still there. One minute I was angry, the next I felt sorrowful for what we had lost, but I kept telling myself that this wasn't just about me anymore. I had to stand up for myself and reclaim my life, and I was ready to take action. The stage was set, and I felt more alive than I had in months. The next steps were crucial, and I was determined to see my plan through. I knew I had to be careful, strategic in my approach. I didn't want to make a move until I had everything in place. I could feel the thrill of revenge coursing through me, and in that moment I understood that while Jessica might be lost in her own world, I was on a path to rediscovering myself. It was time to take back control. With a newfound sense of purpose, I began executing my plan step by step, each action more calculated than the last. I started by engaging with friends I hadn't seen in a while, particularly those who were still in the same circle as Jessica. I needed to gather intel and ensure I wasn't going in blind. The more I learned, the clearer my path became. One Saturday afternoon, I was hanging out with my buddy Mark at a local bar. Mark had always been a good source of information, as he knew everyone and their business. We were sipping beers when I casually mentioned that I had seen Jessica with Ryan a few times. His eyebrows shot up and I could tell he was intrigued. "You're kidding," he said, leaning closer. "I saw them last week at that new Italian place. They looked pretty cozy." Every word felt like ammunition. Listening to Mark's observations only fueled my desire for revenge. The more I gathered, the more I realized that Jessica's secret was becoming less of a secret. I knew I needed something foolproof for my next move, a way to bring this all to light and ensure both of them would feel the sting of their betrayal. I recalled a conversation I had with Amanda about a charity event coming up in a few weeks. It was well known in our social circle, and Jessica had been planning to attend with Ryan. The thought of them flaunting their affair publicly made my blood boil. This was the perfect opportunity. If I timed everything right, I could expose them, and it would have a lasting impact. I decided to dig deeper into Ryan's background. I knew he worked in real estate, so I called in a few favors to access public records and find out more about him. What I discovered was both surprising and useful. Ryan had been married before, and his ex-wife had accused him of cheating during their marriage. The information was golden, and it added a layer to my plan, exposing Ryan not only as a cheat but as someone who had a pattern of infidelity. But I needed more than just past accusations. I needed concrete proof. So I enlisted the help of another friend, Lucas, who was skilled with technology. I shared my plan with him and he was on board immediately. We discussed ways to obtain evidence, including tracking social media posts and possibly using discreet methods to document interactions. It felt a bit underhanded, but I justified it to myself. This was about my dignity, and I couldn't let them get away with it. As the charity event drew closer, I became increasingly anxious yet excited. I knew I was walking a fine line, but the thought of standing up for myself against Jessica and Ryan felt empowering. I practiced what I would say, visualizing Jessica's reaction when she realized I knew. I imagined the look on her face when the truth came out, how it would shatter the bubble they had built around themselves. The night of the event arrived and I was ready. I dressed sharply, wanting to present myself as someone who had moved on, someone who was thriving. I wanted to look good, not just for Jessica's sake, but for my own. I felt like a man reborn, full of confidence and self-respect. When I arrived at the venue, the atmosphere was electric. The room was filled with laughter, clinking glasses, and the sound of music. I scanned the crowd, looking for Jessica. It didn't take long to spot her. She was across the room, talking animatedly with a group of friends, Ryan's arm wrapped around her waist. My heart raced, but I held my cool. I noticed the way she looked at him, and it made me feel sick. As the event progressed, I kept my distance, mingling with other friends and gathering support. I caught up with Amanda and told her about my plan. "I'm ready to drop the bomb tonight," I said, a hint of defiance in my voice. She looked slightly worried but supportive. "Just be careful, okay? You don't want to create a scene," she advised. "I know," I assured her, "but they need to understand the consequences of their actions." After a few hours of socializing, the moment finally came. I knew Ryan and Jessica would be giving a speech later in the evening to promote the charity. I had waited for this opportunity. As I stood near the front of the audience, I could feel my heart pounding. The anticipation was almost unbearable. When they finally took the stage together, Jessica beamed with that familiar smile and Ryan looked smug. I watched as they spoke about love, community, and commitment, words that felt like daggers in my heart given their betrayal. It was infuriating to see them so comfortable, so happy, when I knew what lay beneath the surface. As they wrapped up their speech, I took a breath and made my move. I stood up, my voice steady but firm, cutting through the applause. "Excuse me, everyone. I think it's important that we acknowledge what's really happening here." The room fell silent, eyes turning toward me in shock. Jessica's face drained of color and Ryan looked confused. "Jessica is having an affair with Ryan and I have the evidence to prove it." Gasps erupted from the crowd. I could feel the tension thickening in the air. I continued, my voice gaining momentum. They've been lying to all of you while pretending to be in love. I've got proof of their deceit, and it's time for the truth to come out." At that moment, I produced my phone, ready to show the texts and photos I had gathered. Jessica's eyes widened as she realized I wasn't bluffing. The whispers in the crowd grew louder as I connected the dots, revealing their betrayal to everyone present. The aftermath was chaos. Jessica's facade crumbled, her eyes darting around the room, looking for support that wouldn't come. Ryan tried to defend himself, stumbling over his words, but it was too late. The damage was done, and I could see the realization wash over Jessica as she understood the extent of what I had just exposed. As I walked out of the venue, I felt a surge of satisfaction. I had taken control back, and while I knew there would be consequences to face, I also knew that I had made my point. I wasn't just a victim, I was a man reclaiming his dignity. The path ahead was uncertain, but I felt like I was finally on the right track. As I stepped out of the venue, the cool night air hit my face, and for the first time in weeks, I felt an exhilarating rush of freedom. I had exposed Jessica and Ryan for what they truly were, and it felt powerful. But as the adrenaline began to fade, reality set in. I could hear the distant murmurs of the crowd behind me, the shock and outrage at what had just unfolded. I was about to face the fallout of my actions, and I wasn't sure what would come next. I drove home in a daze, my mind swirling with thoughts. I had acted on impulse, yes, but I had also done something necessary, something that had to be done. I didn't just want to hurt Jessica. I wanted to show her the consequences of her betrayal, to make her realize that her actions had repercussions. I was angry, but I was also hopeful that this would be the wake-up call she needed. When I arrived home, the silence felt deafening. I could almost feel the weight of the chaotic night pressing down around me. I took a moment to collect myself, pacing the living room as I replayed the evening in my head. What would Jessica say when she came home? Would she try to talk to me, apologize? Or would she lash out, deflecting blame onto me for exposing her? Not long after I got home, the sound of the front door creaking open broke the silence. Jessica stepped inside, her expression a mixture of shock and fury. Her eyes locked onto mine, and for a moment neither of us spoke. It felt like a storm was brewing, and I was bracing myself for the backlash. "Did you really have to do that?" She exploded, her voice dripping with disbelief. "You made a scene. You embarrassed me in front of everyone." I took a deep breath, trying to remain calm amidst the whirlwind of emotions threatening to spill over. "You embarrassed yourself, Jessica. You made your choices, and I just made sure everyone knew the truth." "Truth? This isn't truth. This is you trying to destroy me," she shouted, her voice rising in pitch. "You don't understand how hard this is for me. I was going to tell you." "Tell me what?" "That you were cheating on me." "Please, don't insult my intelligence," I shot back, feeling the anger flaring inside me again. The reality of the situation hit hard. She was trying to twist the narrative to make me the bad guy in her story. "You don't know anything about what I've been going through," she continued, her tone dripping with indignation. "I didn't want it to come to this. I was trying to figure things out." "Figure what out?" "How to keep lying to me," I countered, my voice steady but edged with a growing frustration. "You've been lying for months, Jessica. You've had plenty of time to tell me the truth." The argument went in circles, each of us trying to find footing in a reality that had shifted so dramatically. I could see the cracks in her facade, the way she tried to maintain control but was losing her grip. Deep down, I felt a pang of sadness for what we had lost, for the love we once shared, but that was overshadowed by the anger boiling within me. After what felt like an eternity of shouting, Jessica finally broke down, tears streaming down her face. "I didn't want to hurt you, I felt trapped," she stammered, her voice wavering between anger and despair. "I thought I could make it work with Ryan. I thought maybe I could be happy again." "Happy?" I echoed, incredulous. "You thought betraying me would make you happy? Is that really how you see love?" "I don't know," she cried, her voice cracking under the weight of her admission. "I just wanted to feel something again. Everything felt so dull between us, and then Ryan came along and it felt exciting. I thought it was harmless at first." "Harmless? You call cheating harmless?" I replied, unable to mask the disdain creeping into my voice. "You made a choice, Jessica. You chose to betray me instead of communicating about what you were feeling." The silence that followed felt heavy, thick with unresolved tension. I could see her shoulders droop as she realized the depth of her actions. I had wanted to confront her, but now I was faced with a woman who looked utterly broken. The anger within me began to wane, replaced by a sense of sorrow for what had been lost. "You need to leave," I said finally, my voice softer but firm. "I can't do this right now. I need space to figure out what happens next." Jessica's eyes widened in shock, and for a moment I thought she might protest. Instead, she nodded slowly, her face a mask of defeat. "I'll go stay with my sister," she said quietly. "I don't know what else to say." As she packed a small bag, I felt a mixture of relief and sadness wash over me. I wasn't sure if I was making the right decision by asking her to leave, but I knew I couldn't continue living under the same roof with the person who had betrayed me so deeply. When she walked out the door, I felt an unexpected emptiness settle in. I had fought for my dignity, exposed the truth, and taken back control. But it also meant facing the reality of our separation. I had taken a step toward healing, but it felt daunting to navigate the future without her. In the days that followed, I found myself in a limbo. I spent my evenings alone, replaying the events in my mind, trying to make sense of everything. I reached out to friends for support, leaning on their shoulders as I processed the heartbreak. I knew I wasn't ready to jump into a new relationship. Instead, I focused on rediscovering myself. I took long walks, spent time at the gym, and picked up hobbies I had neglected. I needed to focus on my own well-being, reclaiming the parts of myself that had been lost in the turmoil of my marriage. I realized that while I had faced betrayal and heartbreak, I was also gaining clarity. The emotional journey was still rocky, filled with waves of anger and moments of sadness, but I was committed to moving forward. I began to understand that healing takes time, and while I was still hurting, I was determined to come out stronger on the other side. Each day became a small victory, a step toward reclaiming my life from the ashes of betrayal. I had faced Jessica, confronted her lies, and taken back my power. It was time for me to thrive, to find happiness again on my own terms. While I navigated the tumultuous waters of my newfound freedom, I couldn't shake the feeling that the storm wasn't over yet. I had exposed Jessica and Ryan, but now I needed to deal with the aftermath, not just for myself, but for them as well. I had taken a stand, and while I felt empowered by my actions, a lingering question remained. What would their consequences be? The weeks rolled on, filled with a mix of self-discovery and occasional reflections on my past with Jessica. The house felt different without her. It was quieter, and I was slowly becoming accustomed to the solitude. I found myself re-establishing connections with friends and exploring interests I had long overlooked. I even joined a local soccer league, something I had loved in my youth but had set aside for years. Nevertheless, the reality of my situation weighed on me. I was living with the consequences of Jessica's decisions, and I couldn't help but wonder how Ryan was handling the fallout. I knew Jessica had been seeing him behind my back, but now that she was exposed, how would their relationship fare under scrutiny? Then, one evening, as I was scrolling through social media, I stumbled upon a post that made my stomach churn. It was a photo of Jessica and Ryan, seemingly happy together at another charity event. They looked cozy, arms wrapped around each other, plastered smiles on their faces as if nothing had happened. The caption read, "Love conquers all." A wave of anger surged through me as I read the comments pouring in. Friends who had previously supported me were now congratulating them, unaware of the betrayal that had unfolded just weeks ago. I felt a pang of injustice. How could they not see it? I had exposed their deceit, yet here they were, putting on a show for the world. That night, I contacted Amanda, who had been a steady support throughout this ordeal. I needed to vent, to make sense of the emotions bubbling inside me. I met her at our usual cafe, and when I arrived, I found her already seated, a concerned look on her face. "I saw the post," I said as I sat down, my voice tight with frustration. "They're pretending like everything is fine, like they didn't just screw with my life." "I know it's infuriating," Amanda replied, her tone sympathetic, "but you have to remember that they're trying to save face. They don't want to admit what happened." "But it's not fair," I exclaimed, the anger bubbling over. I exposed them for what they really are, and now it's like nothing has changed. It feels like they're getting away with it. Amanda leaned back, thoughtfully considering my words. Maybe they are, but you have to focus on your own healing. You can't control how they present themselves to the world. What matters is that you've taken back your power and that you're moving on. Her words resonated with me, but I still felt the need to do something, anything, to make sure they faced the consequences of their actions. I had already exposed them in a public way, but maybe it wasn't enough. I needed to ensure that their charade came crashing down. That's when I devised a new plan. I could leverage the information I had gathered about Ryan's past and present it to the people in their social circle, to those who were commenting on that photo, oblivious to the truth. It wouldn't be about revenge. It would be about exposing the reality of their relationship. Armed with the knowledge of Ryan's previous infidelity and the details I had collected, I crafted a carefully worded message. I reached out to several friends of mine who had previously supported me, explaining what had truly transpired between Jessica and Ryan and sharing the details of his history. I did it discreetly, wanting to be respectful but also firm in my intention to shed light on the truth. The response was mixed. Some friends were shocked, while others were skeptical, unsure of whether to believe me. As the days passed, I watched the ripples of my actions unfold. Conversations began to shift, and I could sense the tides turning. It wasn't long before whispers began circulating among our social circle. Jessica and Ryan's relationship was scrutinized, and the facade they had built started to crumble. People began to ask questions, and I found a strange sense of satisfaction in knowing that the truth was finally getting out. Jessica wasn't just a victim of my actions. She was also facing the consequences of her choices. One evening, I received a call from a mutual friend, Sarah, who had been caught up in the whirlwind. Breathless, she asked me if I had really known about Ryan's past before everything went down. I could hear the disbelief in her voice. I had no idea, she said, voice shaking. If I had, I wouldn't have supported them. That conversation was pivotal. Sarah started reaching out to others, sharing what I had revealed. Jessica was no longer the image of a happy couple that everyone envied. Instead, she was being discussed as someone who had betrayed her husband and was now with a man who had a tarnished history. The relationship between Jessica and Ryan began to fray. The more people talked, the less support they received. Reading the comments on social media shifted from congratulations to people questioning their choices. It felt like poetic justice unfolding before my eyes. But amidst all this chaos, I still found moments of reflection. I couldn't deny that part of me felt sorrow for Jessica. The woman I had loved was now being scrutinized by people who once idolized her. I didn't want to wish her harm, but I also knew that she had made her bed. Eventually, I reached a point of acceptance. I recognized that this was her journey, and while I played a part in exposing the truth, the consequences of her actions were ultimately hers to bear. I had reclaimed my life, focused on my own healing, and made choices that empowered me. As I moved forward, I began to prioritize myself even more. I sought therapy, reflecting on my own feelings and what I wanted in the future. I joined support groups, meeting others who had faced similar betrayals, and through these connections, I started to realize that I wasn't alone in my pain. The journey wasn't easy, but as I continued to heal and grow, I felt more equipped to face whatever came next. Jessica and Ryan's relationship continued to unravel, and while I felt a sense of justice in the air, I also began to embrace the idea that my own happiness was rooted in letting go. I didn't need to be defined by their betrayal. I was ready to thrive, to forge a path toward a brighter future filled with possibilities. I would emerge stronger, wiser, and prepared for whatever love had in store for me next. As the dust settled, I found myself in a place of unexpected peace. The chaos that had engulfed my life for so long had started to fade, leaving behind a clarity I hadn't anticipated. I had faced the storm of betrayal, taken back my power, and ultimately I was beginning to rediscover who I was outside the confines of my marriage. Jessica and Ryan's relationship continued to deteriorate, and while I watched with a sense of satisfaction from a safe distance, I also felt a strange mix of empathy and relief. I had exposed the truth, and now they had to deal with the fallout of their actions. Their facade had crumbled, and their lives were being scrutinized by those who had once celebrated them. I didn't seek to confront Jessica again. Instead, I focused on my healing journey. Therapy sessions became a source of strength for me. I learned to unpack the emotional baggage I had carried, the feelings of inadequacy and betrayal that had haunted me. My therapist guided me through my anger and sadness, helping me realize that while I had been a victim of infidelity, I was also capable of moving forward. As weeks turned into months, I began to create a life that was vibrant and fulfilling. I dove into new hobbies, rekindled old friendships, and committed myself to self-care. I even took a solo trip to the mountains, where I spent days hiking and reflecting. It was during that trip that I truly understood the importance of solitude and self-discovery. I realized how much I had lost in my marriage and how much I had to gain by focusing on myself. Throughout this journey, I also kept in touch with Amanda, who had been my anchor through the tumultuous times. One day, over coffee, she asked me how I was feeling about everything that had transpired. I smiled, knowing that the storm had passed. "I feel free, Amanda. I've learned so much about myself, and I'm beginning to understand what I want in life." She nodded, her expression warm. "I'm proud of you. You've handled this with so much grace. You're a stronger person now." Her words lingered with me, and I took them to heart. I was no longer the man who let Jessica's betrayal define me. I was moving forward, ready to embrace whatever came next. As the seasons changed, so did my outlook on love. I was cautious but open to the idea of dating again. I joined a few online platforms, but I was careful, taking my time to meet new people. I wasn't looking for a rebound. I wanted to build something genuine, founded on trust and respect. It was during one of these dates that I met Sarah, a kind-hearted woman with an infectious laugh. We bonded over shared interests, and as we spent more time together, I found myself laughing and enjoying life again. She understood the complexities of relationships and was willing to take things slow. With every conversation, I felt the walls I had built around my heart begin to crumble. Exploring this new relationship felt exhilarating, but I was also vigilant with my emotions. I had learned the hard way that trust must be earned. However, with Sarah, I felt something different, a connection that felt genuine. She challenged me, supported me, and most importantly, she respected my past. As the months rolled on, I began to see the beauty in the lessons I had learned. I understood that love, while complex, could also be rewarding. I had faced betrayal, but I had also discovered resilience within myself. I was learning to trust again, both in myself and in the idea of love. One evening, as Sarah and I sat together watching the sunset, I felt a wave of gratitude wash over me. I had navigated through the storm of infidelity and emerged stronger. I had faced Jessica and Ryan and had taken control of my narrative. In that moment, I realized that while they had caused me pain, they had also unwittingly propelled me toward growth and self-discovery. I smiled at Sarah, feeling a genuine warmth in my heart. "I'm really glad I met you," I said, taking her hand. She smiled back, and I knew that whatever the future held, good or bad, I was finally ready to embrace it. I was thriving, not just surviving, and I was determined to continue my journey of healing and love. In reflecting on this entire experience, I would say to anyone facing similar struggles, take the time to love yourself first. Understand your worth and don't allow anyone to diminish it. Betrayal can feel like the end of the world, but it can also be the catalyst for profound growth. Embrace the change, learn from it, and know that brighter days lie ahead. Love will find its way back to you when you're ready to open your heart again.